that third file you sent me.
Cool! I'm also doing important stuff.
Just keep doing what you're doing while I talk at you. It seems like the captain, Yuri, got some baggage.
Who doesn't?
Yeah. There's some old police records here. Did you know she's a third-generation cop?
Huh. Runs in the family.
Kind of. Yuri's father was kicked off the force, convicted and imprisoned for accepting bribes. Magia bribes.
He was dirty?
Dirty as they come. Looks to me like Yuri's trying to make up for her dad's mistakes and taking the Magia down in the process.
Heavy. No wonder she's going so hard on this.
Yeah. I know I'm supposed to be writing about the Hammerhead fronts, but this is some pretty compelling stuff. Call me back soon.
Very interesting, Spidey Squad. Very interesting indeed. Anyways, welcome back, true believers and all you spectacular Spidey fans, to another really exciting Spider-Man PS4 related video. And in case you couldn't tell, this video we are going to be discussing the possibility of Yuri Watanabe turning into the anti-hero known as the Wraith within the world of Spider-Man PS4. Now, after finishing Turf Wars several times at this point, I think it's safe to say that we were all misdirected as to who the main character of Turf Wars really was. Throughout the promotion of Chapter 1 of the City That Never Sleeps pack for Spider-Man PS4, it was heavily shown that Black Cat was going to be the central focus of the heist within Marvel's Spider-Man. And in a similar fashion, we were led to believe that the main villain of the second chapter of the City That Never Sleeps pack of Turf Wars was indeed going to be Hammerhead. But after seeing the outcome of the Turf Wars DLC, it's very clear to show that Insomniac's main focus of that pack was indeed the evolution of Yuri Watanabe's character. Throughout the base game of Spider-Man PS4, Yuri was always a great assistant to Spider-Man whenever he's doing stuff around the city and always trying to help him out as much as she could. Not to mention that every time Yuri contacted you between fighting the Wilson Fisk men as well as the Silver Sable bases that were throughout Act 3, you always got more of a connection between Yuri and Spider-Man as characters and as partners. But overall, the most important factor about these conversations and interactions between Yuri and Spider-Man is that Yuri was always a good to honest cop that always wanted to do things by the book and through the law one by one. Instead of having Spidey go throughout the city and beat up random criminals willy-nilly, Yuri wanted to make sure that Spider-Man did everything by the way that the NYPD would by building a case against all these criminals to take them down easier and quicker. This not only allows Spider-Man to have more of a growing relationship between himself and the NYPD, but also gives you an insight as to how the normal officers of New York deal with things without superpowers. And alongside of this, if you manage to read the prequel novel to the game of Marvel's Spider-Man Hostile Takeover, you would know that Yuri and Spidey's relationship was a bit rocky at first, but as they came closer together, they did bond more as a team and as partners. But given the overall narrative that Turf Wars provided to Yuri's character, as well as seeing her grow as an individual, it does heavily tease that she will indeed shift personas in the next DLC or a potential sequel. Now, if you did pay close attention to the overall narrative that was inputted within the Hammerhead bases, you would know that Yuri has a very rough past with the Magia crime family as a whole, specifically relating to Hammerhead. Not only has Hammerhead himself gathered as much info as he possibly could to make sure that he could take down Yuri at a much faster rate, but also the past of Yuri's father is one that is extremely dirty and rough around the edges. Mr. Watanabe was an extremely crooked cop, and Yuri has done her best to make sure that she doesn't follow in her father's footsteps and try to redeem her family name. Not to mention that the sole reason that she joined the force in the first place was to actually take out the entirety of the Magia crime family. So not only does Turf Wars provide more of an insight to Yuri's background as a character, but it also shows what her main goal is now that the Magia have resurfaced throughout New York City. Regarding the main criminals that we fought throughout the base game, like Wilson Fisk's men along with the Riker's prisoners, was nothing too much out of the ordinary for Yuri, since those are just standard crooks that she has fought multiple occasions in her time as being a cop. And even when it came to the supervillains of the Sinister Six, Yuri still managed to stand her ground and back up Spidey any chance she could. But the reason why the Magia is such a different task for Yuri to handle is because of how personal it relates to her character and her family in general. Not only is she trying to make amends for the wrongdoings that her father did, but she's also out for cold-blooded revenge for what the crime family did to her as a person in general. And after realizing that she has relied too much on Spider-Man throughout the entirety of the game's story, she then decides to take matters into her own hands ends by going after the Maggia crime family and Hammerhead herself. And this is why she goes so far as to basically kill Hammerhead by the end of Turf Wars. So in a way, just like how the main story of Marvel's Spider-Man is seen to some as an origin story of this universe's Miles Morales becoming Spider-Man, the Turf Wars DLC of the City That Never Sleeps pack is seen to some as the origin story of Yuri Watanabe becoming the Wraith. And after seeing what a great job Insomniac has done fully fleshing out Yuri's character, I really hope that she does at some point become the Wraith within this game's universe. And this leads us into one possibility that I could see happening within the last chapter of the City That Never Sleeps DLC of Silver Lining. Now, in general, I did like the overall new gameplay additions within Turf Wars and the new costumes that we got, but I still felt like the story was lacking in some places, mainly relating to Hammerhead and the overall Maggia crime family. Whereas in regards to the heist, Insomniac did a phenomenal job fully fleshing out Felicia Hardy's character, fully having her interact with Spider-Man in an extremely interesting way with one we haven't seen before. And the most important factor about the heist is that even with the Black Cat narrative wrapped up, it still managed to tease that Hammerhead was going to be the main villain of the second chapter with Turf Wars. However, with Turf Wars itself, by the end, the only post-credit scene that we got was the confirmation that Hammerhead was still alive after the fact that Yuri shot him directly in his head. But besides that, we're still left with the unanswered question of what happened to Yuri after she shot Hammerhead. And this is where Silver Lining might actually come into play. So for me personally, I have three possible theories as to what Silver Lining could relate to and who the main antagonist could be. So the first possibility is the most obvious one, is that Silver Sable will make a return to try and gain her Sable International equipment back and try and team up with Spider-Man at one point to take out a bigger threat in order for her to retrieve it. And as for who this bigger threat could be, since we have heard him be name dropped several times throughout the main game and the DLC itself, I do think the main villain of Silver Lining could possibly be Silvermane. Not only would this obviously go perfectly well with the Silver Lining title itself, but it also indicates that Silvermane and Silver Sable within this game's universe may have a deeper connection with each other. And if you've seen the Spectacular Spider-Man cartoon, you know exactly what I'm talking about. As for the second theory, it could lead to the possibility of Silver Sable being the only main antagonist within Silver Lining with no bigger threat in sight. Although this would contradict what happens near the end of Spider-Man PS4's story, where Sable retreats and she is then trying to rethink about her current life choices with running Sable International. So out of all these theories, I do see number 2 being the least likely, although number 3 is actually one that is very intriguing, and that is the Wraith is the main villain of Silver Lining. Seeing how Yuri has become extremely distant with the close relationship that she had with Spider-Man, it would be really cool to see them go against each other within the last piece of the City That Never Sleeps DLC pack. Not only would having the Wraith be the main villain of Silver Lining be a complete way to finalize Yuri's character arc, but it would also be an extremely interesting new input for a character that we've never seen in a Spider-Man game before. Given that Spidey doesn't want to have Yuri go on a bloodthirsty rampage throughout New York just killing Maggia crime family members left and right, I do think it would be a great way to implement her character within the game within Silver Lining. And to make it even more interesting, we could add the possibility of Theory 1 and Theory 3 combining at once. And what I mean by this is, since Sable International equipment is still out throughout New York City and we have received lots of teases to her within the New York newspapers, there is a high chance that Spidey and Silver Sable could team up to get her equipment back and take it out completely while going against the Wraith to make her stop her rampage against the Maggia. Now, there is a possibility that Insomniac could save the Wraith within the potential sequel of Spider-Man PS4, but at that point, I do think the story wouldn't have as much value as it does at this current point. Seeing these plot points come together would be an extremely great task from the writing team at Insomniac, but I have no doubt that they can totally do it in a really cool way within Spider-Man PS4. And if my theories do turn out to be true, that would make Silver Lining's story one of the best narratives to be implemented within Spider-Man PS4's DLC thus far. But as for these theories, these are just 100% speculation, but I can't wait to see what the overall narrative is going to be for Silver Lining coming out in December. But anyways, guys, that's the video that I have for you today, and please let me know all your thoughts in the comments section down below. What did you think of my theories about the Wraith possibly appearing as the main villain within Silver Lining, and would you like to see her be featured as that in Silver Lining yourselves? For me, Insomniac has done a great job reinventing Yuri Watanabe's character from how she usually is in the comics, and seeing how great she is in the game, I would love to see her character be expanded as the Wraith. And besides eagerly awaiting what the new DLC suits are going to be within Silver Lining, the thing I'm most excited to see about it is the conclusion to this expanded story. But anyways, guys, thank you all so much much for watching. Stay spectacular, Spidey fans. Peace out.
Yuri's been disciplined lately. A lot. She's entirely focused on stopping Hammerhead and the Magia. She stopped following protocol. It doesn't look good for her.
Luckily, she's got people who have her back.
Yeah. Listen, Peter. This makes better copy than the Hammerhead friends. I've got to pitch it.
I know you do. I know.
Okay. I owe you one for these files. And I hope things work out for your friend.
Thanks, MJ. Me too.